Welcome to the Business Blueprint, where entrepreneurs and business leaders learn how to work smarter, scale faster, and build better.
Well, good morning and welcome to what is episode 11 of the Business Blueprint. I'm your host, Joe Sandine. So a couple weeks ago, Clay and I had a discussion about, something every business typically has to wrestle with one or more times in their business, and that's the idea of pivoting. So we talked about how markets can change, technology can shift. And oftentimes the best decision you can make is not to stand still, but to make an adjustment. But, here's something interesting. What happens when that same idea doesn't just apply to your business, but it applies to your entire life? Because making a strategic shift in your business is one thing, but making a complete change in direction as a person, that's a whole different level of risk. It impacts your identity, your income, your relationships, really everything in your life. A lot of us feel that tension at some point in our life, but a lot of people don't have, the risk profile to follow that that voice in their head and actually act on it. But today's guest is someone who actually did do that. Mark Wallace stepped out of a successful career in banking and into something completely different, driven by purpose and faith. And he now leads an organization called Faith Forward, which we will get into. But Mark, I'd like to start at the beginning. I want you to take us back to that season of life. Everything probably looked very solid from the outside, but obviously internally, something was brewing in your head. So take us through that.
Yeah, Joe, I appreciate you having me on here. And I don't know if it's harder personally than professionally, right? I look at some of the businesses that make that shift. But yeah, for me, 15-year banking career. To the outside, I think it would be a successful one. I got to a vice president spot and was going into the boardroom. But inside there along the way, having analyzed a lot of businesses and just seeing people rise, I was struggling to find just what is my role inside this, what's my purpose. And a lot of it is just looking back on what are my gifts and skills and experiences and where can they best be deployed, and seeking something probably bigger than a paycheck, I think is what, and maybe people can relate to that. I just know it was very unique to me, but it wasn't a wake up one day type thing. It was something that you chewed on for quite a while. And that was throughout the banking career. And I enjoyed myself doing it. I was analyzing financial statements of businesses. I ended up becoming a banker of businesses and farms. I ended up helping seek growth opportunities for the bank and managing a bank's balance sheet, and just a lot of cool opportunities that when you look back, if you're like, man, if you're young 30s, that would be a career path that a lot of people would aspire to. But it was more like, it was my faith. I think we'll probably get into that, of just saying God has given us all skills and experiences and gifts, and how can I use them best to glorify Him? And can I do it here inside this organization? And I also ultimately wanted the organizations to be God honoring that I was in. And so really just spent a lot of time toying with that and where I fit inside.
So talk about the realization of actually making the decision, and how did that process work for you and your family? I think I said on the episode a couple weeks ago, I have a lot of respect for people who can be, in a career 5, 10, 15, 20 years and have the balls essentially to make a huge career change. There's a ton of risk in that. When I started OnSharp at 20 years old, I really had nothing to lose. I was in college. I wasn't married. I didn't have a car payment, house payment. But, in your situation, you had an established life and career. And, how did that light bulb finally come to fruition? And what was your process for pulling the trigger?
Yeah, I think business leaders will understand taking inventory. And I think personally, we can take some inventory. And so for me, it truly was just kind of a self-exploration of just kind of looking back. And I think a lot of us don't know what we're good at and what our skills are. And so taking a lot of the tests, Clifton Strengths, Enneagram, a lot of those will help tell you who you are. There's also a spiritual gifts test. And so I took that, and Scripture tells us that we all have been given spiritual gifts. And so just exploring and kind of throwing out all that inventory on the table. And then when you start to piece them all together, it really took what opportunities are right in front of me. And so at that moment in time, I'm growing in faith. I found myself in corporate America, if you want to call it that, the private sector, dealing with a lot of businesses and seeing a lot of people. in the businesses, and my deepest desire was to see a lot of people glorify Christ through their work. And then ultimately, Faith Forward came about in Fargo. There was a group that was forming it. There was a bunch of locals, and I know we'll get into this later, but I became on the board. And so a lot of the times that step maybe can start where you're seated. And
Sure.
that doesn't maybe mean you're going to step outside. It might just mean like maybe I want to pivot professionally and I'm working in operations, but truly I feel like I should move to the sales side. How can you potentially make that first step where it's protecting where you're at, but explore that opportunity a little bit while doing the inventory to be like, is this truly who I am? Like, what does it take to be a sales leader while I'm in operations, and what skills and experiences, and can that be relatable? And so for me, it was just like getting on the board. And then also it was getting into a lot of facilitation with Christian business owners as well. So that was it's so easy to look back and just kind of say like it was a long journey over probably 2 years time frame of really chewing on it. But when I look back, it's like there were opportunities that I stepped into prior to making that full, like, let's burn the boats, burn the bridges, and go the other way.
Yeah, because I mean, really, over the course of the years, you really built an identity as a banker, and you built relationships. Was it tough to leave that behind? Did you feel like you were leaving your identity behind, or how did you kind of wrestle with that whole component of you've positioned yourself where you were, and now you're going to make this monumental change, right?
No, it wasn't as challenging as, because I think once you did the inventory and you know deep down in your core, I was convinced that the world didn't need another banker.
You sure about that?
It's funny because I mean, yesterday when you reached out to be on here, I had an old banking client reach out to me. And so like I saw myself more as like a relationship driven person that just loved on people and just happened to have the skills in finance and business.
And that's a good point, because I even in my own life, and I remember when I was in college and I was trying to decide like what's my major going to be, and I was actually I was going to be a double major in computers and education, and like I quickly figured out like that wasn't the right thing. But I was like, well, what's the common link? And for me, it was like I loved working with people, and I thought education was going to be it. But then it really became entrepreneurship and business. And so I think you make a good point. Like you have to kind of dissect the difference between like your skills and the things that you like to do, and then necessarily like you can find many ways to exhibit that in a career choice. And so it's, sometimes people just find, I think they're in the wrong spot, maybe doing some of that, but there's just a different place for them to do that at. So,
and there's never going to be a perfect career choice, right? I think I have a friend, she's a business leader, and she just said like there's like a 70-30 rule where it's like, can you for 70% of your time do something that brings you joy?
mm-hmm.
And then the other 30% is kind of like other duties as assigned, if you will. Like you just all careers come with that, but it's like, can you do a quick mental check to be like, hey, am I really getting joy out of this work right now? And why am I not? And it might just be me, might be a role misfit, might be a career misfit, might be whatever. And just know that like life is very, very short to sit in that forever.
Yeah. So looking back, would you have made the change sooner?
Well, there wasn't an opportunity. I became the first executive director of a startup organization. God's timing was perfect in it all.
Yep.
But I also look back on my banking career that like I got to experience a lot of things that have been foundational for this type of work of being relatable inside. And like, I mean, I would have never been inside of a 500 plus person organization in the boardroom had it happened a year and a half prior to that. So there's just a lot of those things that happened. And I'm like, no, it was perfect timing.
So it brewed in your head for, I think you said a couple of years that you kind of mulled this over. How many times did you talk yourself out of it in that 2 years?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. If you went back to my journal, there was days there, which would have been about, November 2023 through, I'd say mid-January, ultimately making the decision of just, I think a lot of us, when we make decisions like that, we just stew and we mull over things. And I mean, hopefully we take them to prayer, but like, there's just so much stuff that we don't do that. Yeah, it was a long period of time. And honestly, a lot of what we can benefit from like making this is listening to what other people say. I was in a group, facilitating a group of Christian business owners here locally, and And there was something one man said, and I've told him about it. And just very foundational, formative, life-changing things that you kind of hold on to that you're just like, man, that spoke to me, and that's right. And to be honest, without doing it, you're seeking comfort, Mark. And 2 years is going to stew into 2 more.
Yeah.
If you don't do it.
Yeah.
So that was very helpful to have somebody say that.
Sure. All right. Well, we're going to take a break, but when we come back, I'm going to talk about with Mark here what happened next, because he didn't just make a change. He was a part of building something new. So we'll be right back. Welcome back to the Business Blueprint. Today we are talking deeper about pivoting. So I mentioned earlier, a couple shows ago, Clay and I talked about pivoting in your business and going a different direction, new products, new services, adjusting to the market, all that great stuff. But, sometimes in life we make huge personal pivots. We take new jobs, we start new ventures, and that's a much more serious, uncharted territory way of jumping into a pivot. And so today I'm visiting with Mark Wallace from Faith Forward. Mark was in a successful banking career and just wasn't feeling like it was filling his purpose and his passion and what he wanted to do with his life. And so Mark jumped into Faith Forward pretty early in the start of that nonprofit organization. And so in this segment here, I want to talk a little bit about what Faith Forward is and kind of how that process of building out Faith Forward got started. So Mark, just give us a little bit of background. What is Faith Forward, and kind of how did that initial, when you joined on to run the operation, what was that first, 6 to 12 months, what'd that look like?
Yeah, Faith Forward started in 2024 here in Fargo, North Dakota. Two local leaders came together and they just said, how can we equip people to live and lead like Jesus inside their workplace? Mm-hmm. And so they decided to set out and do a conference. I always say the first ticket. I haven't confirmed or denied that, but
you were the number one customer.
Yeah, there's a guy that gave a speech at a Faith Forward-like event that I've watched 200 times. So I could tell that I'm like, yeah, this leader's getting up and talking about how they blend their faith into their work. It helped change me. And so I bought the ticket and then I got on the board. And so I was on the board for about 6 months until we held that first event, that first conference. And so that's what we do today is we've held 6 events now under our belt at Faith Forward. We do quarterly ones and they're all here locally. And then we also do curate some small groups of peers professionally. So like Joe, the owner of OnSharp, would be paired with another owner type thing. And just to help support people that are walking the same path.
So let's go back to just the purpose of the organization. Just give me, what's your mission statement and what is the driver behind it?
Yeah, the mission is to equip people to live and lead like Jesus in their workplace. Equipping, you think about that's the verb inside the mission. That's done through events where we bring in leaders of all kinds. Mm-hmm. And so that first event that we had Steve M. Scheel stand up and talk about, how do they infiltrate that into the Shields organization. Mm-hmm. We also had a lot of local leaders as well. I think Matt Carlson with Fix It Forward Auto Care, who has like a nonprofit. And then we also brought in Dr. Henry Cloud, like a nationally known author of 40 books, clinical psychologist that goes into boardrooms of Fortune 500 companies. And so we're all about just finding out, like, there is no perfect way of how do you live and lead like Jesus in the workplace. We all have different ways to do it. And sometimes people just say, preach the gospel, use words if you have to, just live it out. And so we just take a lot of that. And I just know that, like, the guy that I listened to that over 200 times, I've taken all of his core values and I kind of look at him as the model of humility of how I lead. Other people are taking things from other people the same way. So we just find leaders, put them on stage, find scripture that supports kind of what they're saying, and just obviously make sure that they're a Christian, but just let them go and just allow them to equip the people that attend our events.
Okay, so one component's an annual conference? Is that
annual
accurate?
Conference, yep.
Okay, so you have one coming up in October, right?
Yep, end of October, the 29th and 30th.
Any details you want to share on what's to be expected, or is that all not decided yet?
Well, no, we got a lot of things planned. We're rolling out our speakers on April 7th, and I would love to let you know, Joe, of who they are.
Oh, we're so close.
We're so close. We're so close.
Okay.
But yeah, we're very excited. It'll be our 3rd annual one.
And that'll be in Fargo.
In Fargo.
Okay.
Yeah, Hope Lutheran Church is our host.
Okay, awesome. Okay, then another component, you do breakfast and Bibles. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, Breakfast and Bibles was an event that actually was happening prior to Faith Forward coming about. Kelsey Buell has organization called You Flourish Company. And so I'd been attending those, and she was on the board with us at Faith Forward. And so she gifted us this event. It's a quarterly event. She was getting about 35 to 45 people show up to these events to hear one leader instead of having, we put about 20 on the stage at the conference over a day and a half. This is just one morning, 90-minute event.
Yeah.
And so
is it always 8 to 9:30 in the morning?
Depending on if we had worship last time, and so we can expand it to 2 hours, but it's usually 8 to 9:30. But yeah, so we got gifted that event, and so now we've hosted 4 of those under our belt, and so we had almost 200 people at the last one, and so that's been really fun too. Is that we've learned that at Faith Forward is as much as people like Henry Cloud coming as an awesome speaker, a lot of people loved hearing Steve M. Scheel. They loved knowing it's like, hey, I know Joe Sandine. Like, we've never talked faith. I don't know how he leads his company. I want to go hear him. And so those are the events that we have. So yeah, we have those in the off quarters of the conference. So 3 of those a year locally. And then the conference is the big one.
So your next one comes up on May 8th, it looks like. It's going to be at Dakota Medical Foundation. Sandy Piatz from United Way will be speaking. So
do you know Sandy?
I do know Sandy, yep. Yeah, we're pretty involved, our family in the United Way. And I know Sandy just took that role in the last year.
Yeah.
And has a lot of great experience, obviously. So how did you pull Sandy in for that one?
Yeah, so Sandy, 20-plus year career as a leader here locally. I've gotten to know her just literally since she became the United Way. And so when we come about, through a lot of prayer and discernment, is just that you can't just put anybody on the stage. And also we need to balance it. Like, females need to look up to female leaders, and sometimes male need to look up to male leaders. So we're very cognizant of that. And so Howard Dahl was our previous month. And so with 2 left in the year, I knew it had to be a female. And I just really was drawn to her and her leadership style. She just has this humble confidence to her. And then when I went and explored her, pages, what's the first thing that said on it? Christian. And that speaks a lot more volumes than the word that has not that many letters in it. That's what you lead with. And then when you can see it, and then when you approach somebody like that, just to entertain it, and watching her prayerfully discern, we don't tell them what they need to say. And one of our core values is truth. And it's like we're grounded in the word. And so watching her kind of toy and noodle on what am I going to speak to and what's the verse we want to share, that's been really fun for her. So yeah, Sandy, super happy to have her. We have a lot of people that have expressed interest in hearing her. So it's like you look back, you're like, oh, awesome. Like, she's going to equip a lot of people that day. So we're excited about that.
So building Faith Forward, we talked about on the first segment how you had this career in banking, right? So you obviously had a lot of expertise in the banking world. How did that translate into building Faith Forward? How did you take your skills and your expertise and your knowledge and wisdom from the banking career and apply that to what you've built with Faith Forward?
Yeah, I think there's probably 2 ways to look at that. There's the soft skills that you bring from banking, that it's like knowing how to deal with people, and especially when you're dealing with a lot of leaders in business and business owners. I had so many years of career experience with that, being in banking, and just understanding and respecting, just like, I think a lot of people envy the leaders, Joe, like yourself, and just like, for some reason, I just look at you just like with empathy and just be like, man, it's a tough job. If people understood the risk that a business owner takes, and I know you're talking about pivoting, like what a decision to see that. And so there's those soft skills of knowing that and being able to result. And then there's also the practical skills of saying, like, I would have to guess that I've seen the financial statements of over 1,000 businesses and been able to analyze them up and down. And I'm kind of the junkie that listens to quarterly earnings calls and really learns from people. And so there was a lot of that of just looking in and saying, like, okay, so just because you have a business and we happen to be a nonprofit, America deemed nonprofit and for-profit, all businesses are for-profit. And it's like, how can we use and scale something to the glory of God and just say, like, hey, let's do it and steward this business well. And so there was a lot of that coming in of just saying, like, okay, like, how can you run a successful conference that people want to keep coming back to, but do it in an economically viable and sustainable way and show value? And then how do you build this out and just say, like, hey, what's the next value add? How do you get recurring revenue other than just waiting on ticket sales? And all these things that come with, like,
I mean, you have to run it like a business.
You have to run it like a business. Yeah, because it is. And so a lot of those came from banking as well.
So what have been the biggest challenges building Faith Forward and getting it to where it could, obviously step number 1 is you're the executive director, you're going to run the place. You need to be able to have a paycheck to run the organization. Yeah. Like, What have been the hardest parts about getting it to that stable point?
I think it boils down to patience. We are so fortunate at Faith Forward that like it truly is a movement. When you can just approach somebody like Sandy, Howard Dahl, Steve Scheel, all these people, and just say like, would you be willing to do this? And they say yes. And then you have a host that kind of says like, okay. But to also look at it and say like, and I think you probably understand this probably more than most because of your role of just saying like, as much as opportunity abounds, the budget doesn't quite yet provide for that. Mm-hmm. And so you're running on like an incredible amount of goodwill, I call it, where just people are pouring in. So we have an active working board. And without an active working board right now, Faith Forward would not be what it is. And so it's just being patient, understanding the resources that we have available to us, but also saying like, you need to build a strong foundation because we see this growing out beyond Fargo-Moorhead, but just being patient in that process and not overstretching ourselves with the limited resources.
All right. Well, it's time for another break. When we come back, we're going to talk about how whether you're looking at making a big change like Mark did, or you just need to find more purpose in your current job, how to go about that process. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Business Blueprint. Today we are visiting with Mark Wallace from Faith Forward, and kind of the theme of our show is, and I talked about earlier, 2 shows ago, we talked about making a pivot in your business, maybe changing the products or services you offer, responding to the market. Today we're talking about making bigger life pivots. Mark moved from a successful banking career into leading Faith Forward. Obviously everyone listening is not going to quit their job or start something new tomorrow necessarily, because for a lot of people, I think what they're thinking is, how do I maybe make what I'm already doing feel more aligned with my values? So Mark, let's talk about that a little bit. What do you think it actually looks like to integrate faith and values into your everyday work at your current employer?
Yeah, first and foremost, I think you need to identify and define your values. I would encourage you to go to Scripture and just find out and be like, well, what would be a value? I'll give you a few helpful hints.
Sure. Humility,
servanthood, gratitude, things like that. And so when you start there, just gratitude in general, of just being like, today I have a job. Let's just rejoice and be glad in that.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you start thinking like humility of like, if we just do some self-reflection and just say like, how can I humbly lead where I'm at? But also like there's a thing called false humility of stepping down too much. Sometimes we're called to things. And so where's that opportunity in my current role where I do have strengths and skills? And sometimes it takes some understanding of what are my strengths and skills, but it's like you are positioned in where you're at to serve people. And that's that servanthood one. And looking beyond ourselves to say like, can we find part of our work here today to just say like, let's look at that end user, that end client. This isn't for a paycheck. This isn't for that right there. If that was a decision and you could reframe that and take that to prayer, you'd be leading faithfully in your current role.
And you make a really good point. I think, no matter what your job is, no matter what you're doing, I think you can look at it from different lenses. You can, I'm just going to say, have a selfish lens and think, what's in it for me? Am I happy? Am I loving it? Whatever. But I think if you can really make the flip the switch in your mind to have the servant mentality and really say, okay, in my role, in my job, I'm here to serve, whether it's my fellow employees, it's the customer, whatever it is. It kind of reminds me of like happiness. I think you choose to be happy, because I think we could all be very unhappy if we want to. We can all wake up every day and find stuff to complain about. But I think you make a mental choice to choose happiness and to choose to find the good in everything. And like, what would you say to people that are maybe struggling with that and are having a hard time picking up the servant mentality versus like serving themselves technically in their role?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of get help quick type techniques of saying like a gratitude walk and all that stuff. But I think when you talk about the word happy is happenstance. It's momentary. It's fleeting.
It's fleeting. It is. Yep.
What you're looking for is joy. And the only place that I've found joy is when you pick up the Bible and you start reading it. And that's where transformation happens. And that's where you can go from, my particular story is one of greed. That's what led to my surrender. And now all of a sudden I have like this contentment, which can only be explained because of what's happened through a relationship with the Lord and reading his word. And so I would say like that is case point number one, is that you got to just pick up the Bible and get into it and read. And it's not, it could be day one. You could be microwave. Unfortunately for some of us, it's an oven. But over time that will change. But I do think like in your current day, even just going to bed the night before and just saying like, what am I looking forward to tomorrow? And answer that question and be excited about that, because I think so many people are excited for the weekend and not the work that's in front of them. But then when you say like, what am I excited for? Or like, who can I be excited for through my work? Who can I impact this week or tomorrow? And setting out for it, I think you're really starting to shrink it down in a servant mentality and thinking, being grateful for the opportunities that are in front of you. So those are just some other helpful things along the way. But I just fear that like you can build those habits in, but long term, the only way that I see that joy and not that happiness happenstance is through getting into the word.
So you're equipping people to live and lead like Jesus.
Yeah.
Now, I think a lot of people worry about how do you do that in the workplace without crossing a line, or how do you integrate your faith properly? Do you have advice on how to do that in a way that's not crossing the line from a faith perspective?
Yeah. I also think about Jesus didn't run into rooms with his hands on fire. One time he walked in the temple and he flipped over some tables.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
But that was in the temple. That was not in the workplace, on the mount. There's a way that you just kind of walk into places, and it even just having that joy, saying you're willing to help, a lot of that helps. Now, some people want to take it a step further and be like, I'd really like to disciple within my work. How can I do that? And there's a lot of ways you can do that, where you can maybe just say like, maybe showing up to an employee and just saying like, are you doing okay? Can I pray for you?
Mm-hmm.
And they might say no, and that's okay. You still should pray for them away from that. That might mean maybe you're going to start a Bible study outside of work hours with your coworkers. I mean, there's a host of things you can do that Christ would do and helpful, but it's not a do all of them. It's find something that you're comfortable with and can start small, like any habit you're about to build. This does not mean that you're going to go on and say like, well, I think at the annual meeting that we should have an hour of prayer, and I'm going to make sure that gets done, and I'm going to talk to Joe about it. Mm-hmm. No, what can I do right where we're at, very small, and just impact one person at a time.
Yeah. So do you have any good examples to share with us of someone whose maybe leadership style changed and the way they approach their job changed through this process?
Yeah, the impact, I think when you look at even my life, I think it's seemingly large when you look back, but it's the smallest ones. And one person that I noticed, this individual came to the conference last year and kind of was just, I would just say, done with society, and was about to just go kind of, I don't want to call it rogue, but like just she was done, and she was just going to go outwardly. And I'm also like, ooh, I don't know if I want to do that. So I invited her to the conference. And then over time, just little messages have trickled in. And the most recent one was Ash Wednesday. She took to social media and she made a post, and she had ashes on her forehead. And she said, this is a day that I have always either worked remotely or not gone back to the office after going and getting ashes on my thing, because I was afraid of hiding that I was a Christian. Mm-hmm. And today I didn't. And I was excited about it. And then she posted about it online. And I'm like, think of that growth that person had, and think about how she led. That person walked in with a cross on their forehead, unashamed. And so that's the growth and the impact of just one employee inside one organization. And we will never truly know the people that get to sit beside that particular individual. Think of the change that they're maybe seeing and feeling from that growth of that one person. And so those are the stories that just really excite me. Another one, somebody just said they got changed. Now I just found out literally just this week that they're 90 consecutive days of reading the Bible. I mean, that's where transformation comes from. Those are wins. Those are huge wins, big impact, because 91 days ago they weren't reading their Bible. And so those are the things that we have to kind of keep our ear to the ground and listen for and see, but only God will know the true impact of who they are. We can't measure that.
Yeah, and I think you make a good point. I mean, it's not like you have to flip a switch and make monstrous change overnight. I think, even for myself in my faith journey, it's come with small increments and small doses. I remember, I'm Catholic. I remember being in Mass one day, and the priest was talking about adoration, and it just hit me that week. Like, his message, I just felt like God was speaking to me. Like, I think that's the next thing I'm supposed to do. So I signed up for an adoration time slot, 1 hour a week, and I just started doing that from 11 to 12 every day, and that deepened my faith and changed my life, and just made me more focused on the message. And I read Sermon on the Mount every time I'm in adoration. It's just a good reminder. So many great lessons about how to live life and how to live like Jesus in there. Then I had a calling to join a group called the Fisherman Group in my parish, and that was another step. And like, I think people just have to realize, like, a faith-led life it's just a continuous evolution towards perfection, even though we all realize we're never going to be perfect, but our pursuit of perfection is what drives us to make that incremental change.
Yeah, and I think sometimes too that the world is going on so fast around us that it's easy to maybe say that I can't take an hour to go to the adoration class.
Oh, it's super easy to say that and that's such honestly a BS excuse, because so many things in life we say, oh, I don't have time for that. But then it's like, well, you made time for a lot of other dumb things that you spent your time on.
Yeah. But I do think, even in my own, I'll be the first one to say it. It's hard, challenging work to say that I'm unfulfilled in my career and I don't know if I want to do this all the time and not be grateful for the opportunities that you have.
Yeah.
Like, that's a tough spot to be in, and be like, well, how am I going to get out of this or make the pivot or like literally change myself? And we just talked about it, like, read your Bible, or maybe start making steps, or asking people what your skills are. Like, all those things require a little bit of work.
Yeah.
And it's easier.
And listen. I think the key, listen for God to speak to you. Because I think He's always there speaking to you. It's just whether you're listening or not.
That's right.
I think as you start reading Scripture and you pray and you do things like adoration, and there's so many ways in which you can eliminate the noise of the world and truly listen, and then the answers are there.
That's right. So unfortunately, unfortunately, we can't say like, this is how we build software, right? This is the code to make it happen.
Yeah.
But
so what's one, if I'm someone listening and I want to go to my job tomorrow and just make one small change to start moving in the direction that's going to create some positive change, what's one piece of advice?
I would just tell you, Scripture tells you to pray without ceasing.
Okay.
You need to be in relationship with the Lord. And so tomorrow I don't mean it verbally out loud, begin praying in every room that you're in, but even if you could just start your day with prayer. You slam that car into park and you're in that parking lot and you say a quick prayer. Try that for a week and let's see how that goes.
Love it. That's great advice. Yep. All right. Well, when we come back, we're going to zoom out a little bit and look at the big picture. We're going to talk about where Faith Forward is going and what's on the roadmap. We'll be back in a minute. Welcome back to the Business Blueprint. I'm your host, Joe Sandine. Today, I'm visiting with Mark Wallace from Faith Forward. Today, we're talking about making major life pivots. Mark left a successful career in banking and joined up with Faith Forward, where he's equipping people to live and lead like Jesus in the workplace. And so I'm going to take a moment just to talk about kind of where things are going with Faith Forward, and what are you seeing as far as what's working and where success is where things are being fruitful for people in what you guys are doing, and what's ahead for you guys.
Yeah, I think the last segment you mentioned something about listening to God. God doesn't audibly talk to me, but He does put things in action. Yeah. And I think when you get into the Word. And so last summer, I had a gal reach out to me from the Mankato area and just said that she's like, I felt led to reach out to you, Mark, and what do you do? And at the time, I was facilitating some Christian men's groups, and I was executive director of Faith Forward. Now I'm just the executive director of Faith Forward. At that time, I told her about that. She goes, I want a group like that. And so here, God had provided me a group like that online. I'm like, well, she's in Mankato. How can I pair this out? She's a C-suite woman without ownership in her company. That's a whole different level of that. So we ended up putting together a Christian stakeholder group for this woman and piloting it. And now we just launched that this year to kind of figuring it all out and getting it out there. And so when we announced that at our last Breakfast in Bibles, 10 people raised their hand and said, like, I need that. I need a group of peers that I can go to for support in my professional pursuits, but also say, like, in alignment with my faith. And so devotionals and everything like that. So that's one thing that's really exciting. Another thing we found out is just goes as on fire as Fargo is, and we have 200 people showing up for this. And last year's conference, we had 400 people show up. We know that Sarah West was kind of the heartbeat behind this right now today on getting going. She's the co-founder.
Yep.
We know there's Sarah West in other metros. And so we always thought, and we've been praying and just said, hey, we would love these people to come and experience Faith Forward in Fargo at a conference. And then how can we help equip them to get something going in their community?
So you want to create like local chapters per se?
It's like a TEDx model,
Yep.
right? So there's TEDx and Independence. And it's funny that how all this works out. Just this morning I was on a Bible study and we were going through James chapter 4. And this verse has guided us. It just says, now listen, you who say today or tomorrow we will go to this city or that city, spend a year there, carry on business and make money. Why? You do not even know what will happen tomorrow. What is your life? You are a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if it's the Lord's will, we will do this or that. So as much as like that's like the thought, we should do that, we've made the decision to say, like, we will not pursue cities. We will wait for people to come out. And another person has just come out of another metro that is on fire and is capable. And we've even done some reference checks, and it's just like, wow, we think this is going to happen.
So it's not like you've created some mandate. We're going to be in 12 more cities in 2026. It's more responding to the calling and in the message and the people who raised their hand.
That's right. And it's not for a lack of planning. I did a strategic plan, just like I hope all business owners do, then just kind of laid out like what can we foresee this happening. And this is within our 3-year plan, but it's like coming about being like, this is it. This is happening. And so like we do see this mission spreading well beyond Fargo-Moorhead, but we just need to be patient and obedient and just for what's in front of us. And so what's in front of us today is Breakfast and Bibles on May 8th. We'll have another one in August. We'll have the big conference in the end of October. We'll potentially having another Breakfast and Bibles in another city, which is exciting, as well as forming these Christian stakeholder groups.
So let's talk more about the stakeholder groups. How do you see those playing out? Is that like an online community, and how would you pair people together?
Yeah, great question. So it is. It's truly a raising your hand, filling out a form on our website, and then finding out who this person is and what kind of support they need. And so it's not just saying like, hey, I got a collection of 4 females right here, and now here's the 5th. Let's pair them together. Groups like that don't work.
Mm-hmm.
It's really hard to have somebody that's maybe a marketing manager that's working with somebody that's a business owner. 2 totally different things.
Right.
And then also industries. You can't have the same industry in the same room because, you know what? If there's another owner of a software company, Joe might not open up because he's not going to share a lot of his skills. But what you find in business is a lot of these things are the same way. Hiring people, passion thing. Should I pivot? Can you help me think through this? What does Scripture say about it? How can I support you in prayer? All of these things is what people are kind of yearning for. And so those groups are a lot of who raises their hand, and then there's a lot of figuring it out. Here locally, we just found out a lot of them. Private practice female providers is one right now. Now you think how niche that is.
Yeah.
Here's people that are in the healthcare field but don't have really business experience. And how can they support each other when they have to do with insurance? So right now, we've had enough raise their hand that I'm like, I need to go find these women and help support them. And so there's been a lot of conversations about getting that one formed, getting it off the ground. It is online. And so that if you ever missed one, 75 minutes long, there's some pre-work involved. And so that they can just be in community and have a really effective call when they do get together and just want to keep coming back. Could be in person if they're all local, but that we don't let the geographical bind them. Like it's like, hey, if they're not here in Fargo-Moorhead, can we go get them in Mankato, Minnesota, or wherever it might be else to be?
So what excites you most about what's ahead?
What excites me the most is just that God is moving through Faith Forward. it's so fun to me when you hear the stories of the ashes on the forehead, when you hear that Sandy's willing to do it, and that you actually get to see on Facebook that there's over 100 people that have marked that they're interested to go to and hear that. And it's just looking at this saying like, God, can we just be part of your work and your movement here locally, and ultimately just find a way to have business leaders live and lead through their work for him. That's an incredible joy. And that's just something that, to think that this is ever a spot I'd be in, but then you just get to have that impact. And it's not for me. I just need to be obedient to it.
Yep.
And just happen to be sitting in the seat. That's what I'm most excited about.
Well, Mark, thanks for being on. This has been a great conversation. I think we really covered two themes, making a major pivot like you did, in business and changing your career, or maybe it's just finding more purpose in your role and in what you do, and learning to live and lead like Jesus, which is what Faith Forward is helping people do. So that is it for our show today. We will see you next time.